Hello everyone. Welcome in. It is 10:01 p.m. Central Time on Sunday, July 17th, 2016. I want to welcome you all into the Earthquake 3D live stream, where we recap the day's events that struck since my update last night at 10 p.m., and we run over the areas we're watching for the next few days. Of course, if you've been paying attention to what struck in the United States over the past day, in the Midwest there was over 1,000 felt reports at the USGS site alone, not counting the European sites and the other sites, where people reported feeling the 4.1 that struck yesterday in the Midwest. Additionally, after the earthquake on the East Coast yesterday, there was a 3.7 down here off the coast of Florida. The mainstream media finally weighed in on that, on the 3.7, and there's several dozen stories that appeared today talking about how the 3.7 was the first earthquake to strike in 10 years' time. So they actually got a date on that. Last night I told you it had been over 7 years, and I've been watching for over 7 years and hadn't seen any activity there. And now the media has confirmed it was 2006 the last time any activity struck off the coast of Florida. Following that, look what happened. A 1.1 right along the coast of South Carolina. And the earthquake, the pressure transfer that we would expect off that, off the 3.7 off of Florida's coast, is starting to occur up to the northeast, and now we see smaller movement spread out from that location. In addition to that, yesterday we told you guys we were watching for new 5.0 activity to strike down in South America, and I was watching South Chile, and we were watching for additional larger movement to strike, and instead of the area to the south middle, we saw the area to the north middle move. And I talked about that over the past several days. It's 50-50 on which spot was going to go, and I was leaning towards the south for the larger movement to strike. And there was many reasons behind that, but can't win them all. This time it struck right in the middle of the silent zone to the north. So that plays into the earthquakes that struck to the north as well, which I didn't take into account yesterday at all. If we have to go back 2 or 3 days to even see that activity. I was basing my larger movement upon the deep 5.1, and now we do see larger movement, a shallow 5.2, strike a silent zone nearby, but it wasn't to the south. Instead, to the south, a swarm struck right in the middle, right by the area we warned. We warned the area just a little bit south of here, right where this little island is, and just to the north of there, that's the spot that got struck. So, both silent zones did get hit, but not by the magnitudes I'm expecting. It still could go another day, but it's looking like this is what we're going to get off that deep 5.1. The next stop on all this is the South Sandwich Islands. Could it recombine and form our large earthquake down here? It could. It very well could, but again, I'm watching the silent zones for the movement, and we compare it to the magnitudes to the north to get our magnitude possibility for the next few days. So when you look at the magnitudes to the north, we have to watch for a mid-5 to strike down here along the South Sandwich. If it goes larger, then that will be the results of the 5.2 that struck very deep. So I'm kind of puzzled by this, but then again, we did have a day of silence around the entire planet, and then that resumed back off with these very strange earthquakes striking off the coast of Florida. We also saw some activity strike over in Europe. Let's go show you that really quick before we get into the West Pacific. Over here in Europe, let's just turn down the earthquake so we can see the European last 50. And Turkey, this is just too strange. The borders of Turkey have been being struck over and over again right before this whole military coup, and now right after. And I mean directly along the perimeter of the country, striking at the border regions to the east, north, west, and south. I don't know what that is. Again, it could just be seismic activity, but the chances of it just striking around the border of the country, that's why I said it's very weird. In addition to that, we saw new reports coming out from CERN that several, magnet failures. I got somebody sending me different information on that. I'm still having to vet that because it didn't come from CERN.ch. It came from a European news source, and it's in a different language, so I still have to do the translating on that. But Greg Hanford, our CERN researcher, came over and let me know that they were doing new beam drops. And when they started doing the beam drops, that's when we started to see the new swarms kick up down near Turkey, also around Switzerland itself, so another 2.7. striking in mid-Europe. So what does that mean? Well, CERN is dropping a lot of power down to ground. That's inducing earthquakes around the area, around the whole plate surrounding Switzerland, North Italy, France, also east in Austria, Serbia, Slovenia. All these locations are now being hit over and over again, and it coincides, ironically, with a lot of the beam drops at CERN. In the West Pacific, Japan still swarming out. Check it out, guys. A new series of fours or mid-fours striking right near the megaquake location from 2011. Zoom in here and show you Japan, and you'll be able to make out the megaquake spot here off the coast of Japan, and now it's being struck by a swarm. We're not expecting a new megaquake, but this is just the result of other activity that struck over the past day and a half. We saw all the 5 strike. And if you hear dings and rumbles, it's earthquakes. Check it out. Just as I'm talking, the silent zone to the south just got hit by a greater 5.3. Looks like I just didn't give it enough time. This is exactly 24 hours from the point where I warned it last night. So last night's update, about 10-15 minutes into last night's update, at about 10:15 last night, we warned the middle of this silent zone for larger, shallow movement to strike. Now it just struck as I'm talking, in addition to the silent zone to the north. But it's larger to the south, in addition to the swarm. You have to add in that swarm that's there as well. So it's more movement to the south than to the north at this point. Wow, okay, well, I thought I got it wrong, I mean, look, I'm willing, that just proves it to you guys. I'm willing to admit when I get it wrong and try to look into why, but I just didn't give it enough time. Now the middle of the silent zone to the south was hit by that shallower earthquake, and it is shallow. It's even shallower than, or more shallow than the other earthquake. The higher these are off the planet, the deeper they are into the earth. So you should be able to make out that the earthquake to the north is actually deeper than this very shallow 5.3 right along the Chile coast. Very, very interesting to see that. Okay, so let's get back over into the West Pacific and talk about Japan and what we're watching for over the next couple days here in the West Pacific. Now, Japan was struck by the swarms of 5s to the north and that deep earthquake. I talked about that last night. See it raised high off the globe here? And what did I tell you guys to watch out for after that? If you remember last night's update, I said watch to the west-southwest down near Nepal, Laos, and Burma, Myanmar, for compensation movement. And it had been completely quiet there. Well, we have our deep earthquake over here in the 4 range, and now striking here a shallow 4.6. In addition to all that, look at the activity just to the west over the past day. See that? Okay, that's a progression of 4s going all the way across the Mideast into South Europe. And that's the European feed showing us most of those earthquakes. USGS just not reporting them. So what does it mean? It means pressure is transferring to the west from the West Pacific, and that follows a series of 5s that struck yesterday. And if we take it down just over 24 hours, you'll also be able to see the deep earthquake that played out in Indonesia. That's a deep 4.5, which also put pressure to the west-northwest and caused this cluster of earthquakes we see in Asia now. So what do we watch for? What do we watch out for over the next few days? Well, to get into it, let's get into the United States. The way we do this, there's 2 different ways we can forecast earthquakes. When we're forecasting for long term, we look at the last 48 hours. When we're forecasting for a small area, like a country like the United States, we use the last 24 hours and look at all the different earthquakes. So there's 2 different feeds we have to consult for 2 different types of earthquake forecast we do. One's a more international forecast that covers all the areas internationally. Another's a more refined forecast for most of my viewers who are in the US. I also do it for Europe from time to time. So let's get into the US earthquakes that struck since last night. All the 0.0s, all the 1.0s, 2.0s, let us know the spots that are currently moving, and it gives us silent zones to watch for new movement to strike. We can determine magnitudes to watch for based upon the other magnitudes when we combine them. So we have to look for a combined total and then look for the nearby silent area and watch for compensation movement to occur in that silent area that's greater than the other movement that's striking nearby. Hope that makes sense. So we see 3s, a swarm of 3s striking up and down the coast since last night. You don't see the other 3s on this map, but if you could, you would see them up into Washington State. It's just beyond 24 hours when those earthquakes struck. I guess I do have to show them to you, so let me open up that feed really quick. and we're looking at everything 3.0 and greater, then you'll see just north of the border, 3.2, just south of the Washington border in Oregon, 3.0, skipping across northern and central California, going down to South California, 3.0, 3.0, 3.4. That was all pretty much in the last day and a half. So we have a silent zone that's in between these spots, and that's Northern California this time, going from San Francisco up to the Gorda Escarpment. So we've moved the silent zone to the south slightly, and we're watching for larger movement still. We're still watching for the 5 to strike, but the silent zone has shifted slightly south due to the 3 striking on the coast, interior to the coast. So the whole west coast moved on a 3.0 level, letting you know something's right offshore pushing you, causing that 3.0 activity. Also pushing as far east as the east coast, letting you know it's a larger amount of pressure that's actually causing this 3.0 swarm across 1,000, 2,000 miles of the west coast. Pushing as far, pushing as far east as the east coast of Florida. So what does it all mean? It means that we're seeing pressure come from the northwest in the silent zone. And when it releases, it should be greater than the combined total of what we see on the screen here now, plus all the smaller earthquakes. That takes us up into the 5.0 range. So watch out off the coast next 2 days. Beyond tomorrow, going into 2 days. Now, let's get into the large earthquakes and why they haven't struck up to the north. This is very concerning to me because we're watching for large movement to strike up near Alaska, Vancouver Island, just north of Vancouver Island. In case you don't know where Vancouver is, it's north of this 3.2. It's the island here off the coast. And Alaska reaches down here east-southeast. Well, it's been quiet. There's only been a few 2s and 3s striking across Alaska. This isn't normal. We would normally expect to see larger movement. Pavlov didn't blast off like they said it was going to, which means something's building in the area. It still hasn't released. We've been watching for 2 days. Still hasn't released. Well, just like I was a little bit hasty down here in the south saying I missed it with the 5.2 that just struck in this location, maybe to the north as well, we need to give it just a little bit more time before we toss in the towel and say that the pressure hasn't transferred across the north like I was expecting. Other than that, though, the locations we've been watching have definitely been hit, and there's been a progression of earthquakes spreading out. It's pretty obvious. We have a new player in the mix over the past week that I didn't mention last night that you should be aware of here in the West Pacific. It plays into the West Coast. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is because earthquakes over here matter to us in the United States. So when we see new activity spreading out, let's turn this down for the last 48 hours. It's pretty obvious. South Pole, past New Zealand, west all the way through South Indonesia, north through Japan, west through Nepal, going over to Bombay, India, about 200 kilometers north of Bombay. Very, very rare earthquake in India. And this follows the near 4 in the United States off the coast of Florida. Again, rare earthquake starting to strike after that silence that kicks off for a day, maybe 2 days. We see silence, and then it comes back with a vengeance. And it's come back with a vengeance over the past 24 hours. You can see it on the screen, all the white earthquakes happening today, all the pinkish earthquakes happening last night. So the progression is obvious, and the silent zone stands out. The magnitude should be 2 magnitudes larger than the deep earthquakes we see over here. So we're looking at 4.5s, dueling deep 4.5s, taking us up into the 6.5 range here in the West Pacific. This should then play into our activity in the East Pacific along an adjacent fault zone. Now these faults do connect, even though the professionals say they don't. When we see large 6.5 and greater earthquakes strike over here in the West Pacific, we see lateral movement over to the east, along the fracture zones usually. And it terminates over here to the east, and we see a similar sized earthquake within a few days' time. So if we start going into the Northwest Pacific, we start having to watch over off the west coast of the U.S. yet again. So west coast of the U.S., you are under the gun right now. Most people don't even know it. They're completely oblivious. They have no clue that there's building pressure off the coast right now. If it strikes on land, it'll catch everybody off guard. If it strikes out in the ocean, no one will even know it happened. So that's it. I mean, look, do you want to take the chance of it striking out to sea or on land? Or do you want to be prepared if you live in Northwest California, San Francisco, north of the Gordo Escarpment, possibly inland, but more leaning towards out to sea? Okay, and the reason I'm leaning out to sea is because something is pushing the whole North American plate from west to east, from the west coast to the east coast, and causing all this activity over the past week. Take a look at it. Heavy activity west coast, moderate activity in the Midwest, light activity on the east coast. Proof that something's pushing us from the west to the east. It doesn't just happen there, though. It happens in Central America and South America. I talk about this every single night. And the areas we talked about last night have now been hit, including down in South Chile, which, by the way, the USGS, let's just make sure about this before I say anything. Yeah, USGS is not reporting the 5.3. Guys, this is the European feed showing the 5.3. USGS, let's go check their 24-hour feed. Do they have it on there? Nope. Let's go check the USGS last 7-day feed. Do they have it on there? Nope. Let's go check the USGS last 60-minute feed. Do they have it on there? I mean, this is over the last hour. I just started my update 17 minutes ago. No, they don't have it there either, but they have more recent earthquakes. So what, are they just not going to report it because it was in the middle of a forecast area? Maybe. But just letting you guys know, if you want to get the real deal on earthquakes, you're going to have to drop the USGS site, or at least give up on them putting this up in a timely manner. You're going to have to get your information from another country, unfortunately. And I'm here to tell you, I'm putting them all together myself because I'm finding out that relying on them for scientific data is becoming very, very unreliable. All right, so anyways, that's what we've got for the United States. West Coast, once you guys move, then the rest of the entire country will move to the east. So it's really a domino effect. Once the West Coast starts to spill, then we'll see pressure transfer over to the Intermountain West and start a new swarm up at Yellowstone again. So it's been a little bit, guys. Have you seen any swarms at Yellowstone over the past week, 2 weeks? Nope, there sure hasn't been. Why? Because the pressure transferred all the way to the east, caused our 4s, remember all the 4.3s and 4.2s this past week at the fracking operations? Well, that's what's happening now. Now let's turn back on the last 24-hour feed really quick. I want to go show you guys something that developed out over in Nevada. Once again, there's something going on here that you guys need to be made aware of, okay? So, see the swarm in southeast Nevada? See this down here? It's a small swarm, but it's still a swarm. Okay, I'm going to get the coordinates on this. See this Alamo, Nevada? Let me turn on my other screen share so you guys can see the whole screen. Here we go. Okay, so it's just a 1.1, but it's part of a swarm of dozens of earthquakes that have struck here over the past week. And starting about a week ago, once the 4.3 struck near Lake Tahoe, oh, whoops, grabbed the wrong information there. Hold on. Grab the coordinates on this, and we'll put them in on Google Earth to go see what's there. Now, I already know what's there, but I just want to show you guys. It's just really interesting to me that it's striking here. I'm not going to spoil it for you. For all the people who are in chat, you guys are going to be blown away when you see this. Okay, the Raysand Volcanic Buttes just to the west let us know that there's something nearby that we need to check out. You need to remember Raysand because finding this test site is actually very hard. See all these craters with all the little blue eye place marks next to them? Every one of these blue eye place marks is a different documented nuclear test underground. And all of these craters are different underground nuclear test sites. It goes all the way up here. I mean, there's so many. It's kind of hard to see. You may have to full screen it. But they just go on down to the south. And it's not just underground, because this is also the spot where the famous nuclear test footage comes from, where the trees were blown over and the mannequins were in the houses all set up to be destroyed. They showed it in like the Indiana Jones movie. Well, this is the nuclear test site here, guys. And we're seeing earthquake strike at and near the test site. I mean, directly inside as well, not just over to the east like right now, but striking all throughout here in the blast zones and to the east at the volcanic buttes, and there's several buttes, most of which are not marked. I mean, this one here, Range 61 Volcanic Buttes, is marked, and you can make out the old basalt on here. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But you look just to the east, and we have other volcanoes that are not marked, but they're just as obvious when you zoom in on them and you take a look at the basalt that makes up. I mean, you can even make out the old lava flows on this, and, what can I say? They're not all marked. So what's right here at the earthquake epicenter? Well, it looks like another ancient volcanic butte that's just unmarked. Some kind. It's got tufts of basalt on top. That lets you know that at some point in the past, this did have lava on top. And we have old basalt, igneous rock, and other evidence of other butte eruptions in the past. Small. That's a little small peak on there. All right, well, so there we go, all right? So that's just interesting to me to see the nuclear test site starting to get hit. Why? Well, all the volcanoes are being hit to the west, west-northwest. You see this swarm of earthquakes due west right here on the screen. This is a fairly large swarm of earthquakes. And this is striking at Mono Lake supervolcano. I can just bring you over and show it to you really quick. Just due west. And here's Mono Lake volcanic field. And it is a supervolcano. Past blast caldera there. And it's part of the Mono craters, Long Valley, Caldera, Inyo craters, and Mammoth Mountain, which everybody in California knows about Mammoth Mountain. They may not know about all the different calderas out here and different lava fields, and there's so many, there's hundreds of them, so you can't expect people to know about all of them. But you can make out some of the craters here still. They're covered by trees, and the cones are somewhat weathered down over time, but the obsidian buttes stand out. These are domes which rise out of the ground. I think this one is actually named Obsidian Butte. Let's just see if we've got our place marks on there. Yeah, that one's Obsidian Dome. Oh, we've even got some pictures here. Hold on. Look at that. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's just absolutely huge. Oh, do we have a bigger picture? It won't. It won't open. All right, well, we don't really need to see it. It's just proof that this whole area is volcanic, and we have a swarm striking right here near Mammoth Mountain. If you look at the other locations, which I've shown over the weeks, I'm not going to bother showing them to you now, but all the other earthquake locations going up to the north and down to the south, all striking at different dormant volcanoes. That's across Nevada, all the way up to the border. So the 1.4 up at the border here at the northwest tip of Nevada, striking at Bittner Butte volcano. To the west, you have one lone earthquake on a fault zone 2.0 at Eureka, California. Due south of there, or southeast, we have a stack of earthquakes. That's the geothermal pumping operation at Clear Lake Volcano at Geysers, California. They're injecting water there, and the injection of water induces earthquakes when there's other pressure involved. And there's a lot of pressure coming from off the coast, causing all our threes down the coast. And that's also causing swarms of earthquakes at the geothermal pumping operation to the north. Further to the south, we have a 2.4 striking in South San Joaquin Valley. And that's right next to a pumping operation, just a few miles away. And I wouldn't look that up earlier. I don't want to waste too much of your time right now going over every single earthquake, but pumping operation at the 2.4, feel free to go look it up. It might take you a minute to find the pumps, but they're there. And then down to the south, just northwest of downtown Los Angeles, right next to the offshore oil platforms. So maybe we should show you those, since I didn't get to show those the other night. Okay, here we go. Here's our multiple offshore oil platforms. They're marked here, Exxon, Santa Ynez, and then our earthquake striking just to the north, right here on the range. And let me get the coordinates on this 3.4 just to show you guys. See, Santa Ynez or Inez. We'll grab the coordinates. If you're on the west coast, pumping operations always move right before we see movement off the coast. You guys get warning signs. You really do. And the bigger the earthquakes that strike at the pumping operations and dormant volcanoes, the larger the earthquakes that are off the coast. So you need to pay attention now. Now is the time to pay attention. Now you see my marker up here, it says frac wells. Now that was from 2 years ago when an earthquake struck nearby this location. Last night I came in and decided I was going to inspect a little bit closer just to see if it was just that spot or are there other spots where they have oil wells and frac wells that I just missed. As it turns out, I sure missed some. They're hard to see. You have to really do some inspection. Here's an oil well right here. And right across the hill, you've got one on the other side. And these go all throughout the area. So it's not just those two. We've got many more tucked into the hillsides here, over to the east, down to the south, and most likely down to the south, as far south as the range. So our earthquake striking there's no doubt about it, it's related to the pumping operation right at the location, or nearby the location. And then right offshore, you have your Exxon Santa Ynez or Ynez, whatever, vessel heliport. We don't have a picture of it here, but to give you an idea of what they do look like, let me zoom in and show you one where there is a picture. And you guys have all seen these offshore drilling platforms. Well, they're doing fracking out here, guys. They're not really extracting too much oil at these locations, I don't think, anymore. I think it's pretty much just injection and fracking from the platforms. Now, maybe wrong. Maybe they are just doing oil extraction at the Exxon Santa Ynez. But we see the oil pumps to the north, the frac wells to the north as well. That means, most likely, man-made induced operation causing the earthquake to release there, as opposed to some other location. And where did we just get struck? Oh, another 5.0 just struck. 2 5s and a 4.5 struck after the 5.3. I'll be darned. Really swarming out there now at the central Chile Point. Well, it's good that it's a swarm as opposed to a single larger earthquake. We talked about this last night as well. The deep 5.1 that occurred down below Bolivia, causing shallow upwelling pressure, and now it's being struck by a huge swarm. Okay, well, I hope that recaps it for the west coast of the U.S. Guys, try to explain why we watch these spots, what we watch for. The reason we're watching for a 5 off the coast is because 3's already struck all the way down the coast. You're getting struck at your pumping operations and your dormant volcanoes. It's pushed all the way over to the east coast, letting us know the pressure button's been reset to re-hit again off the west coast of the U.S. Central America, South America, where do we watch? Well, this is a little bit tricky. Central America has gone completely silent for well over a week. Take a look at it. This is the last 7 days of earthquakes. No activity at all above 4.0, striking across all of Mexico, Honduras, Belize, going right down into Costa Rica. So what does that mean? Well, silence is not good in earthquake-prone areas. Mexico's earthquake-prone off the coast. Central America, you would expect to see a series of 4s or 5s strike over the week. So it hasn't hit. What does that mean? Well, look at the combined total between the two earthquakes to the north and the earthquakes to the south and the earthquakes to the east. This lets us know a tremendous amount of building pressure is occurring in Central America. I'm not going to put a time frame on it yet because I don't think we're looking at a release today. I think we're going to see the activity off the west coast of the United States first. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, because I don't have anything to base the magnitude on other than the swarms of 4s to the south and the swarms of 2s and the 4s to the north. If put those together, that leads us into a 5.0 range, but I'd be expecting something much larger than a 5 with the amount of time this has been silent. Now, there may be new volcanic eruptions that are occurring that are just not making the news isn't making it to me. Maybe it's in Spanish. Maybe people aren't telling me. I've been searching eruption, but nothing's been coming up much. Maybe there's been new eruptions that would account for the silence and seismic activity. We do see that when volcanoes erupt in an area, it'll cause earthquakes around the volcano for sure, but then that relieves pressure overall. So Central America, you might have your pressure relieved by volcanic eruptions. Now, I don't know which you would rather have. A large volcanic blast that relieves the pressure, or a series of earthquakes that could cause some major damage. I would probably lean towards the volcanic eruptions, because at least those, you can see them. right? Okay, so that being said, again, we watch the silent zones for the movement, and you take the movement into account happening nearby at other areas. That will help you to determine the spots to watch. Which silent zones in the West Pacific? I'm sure people are curious, aren't you? And I'm sorry, I just tried to take a drink of coffee while talking, and it almost came out my nose. That's very professional. All right. So, West Pacific. Let's get into this really quick. We have a few silent zones in the West Pacific. Not many. The whole area has been hit except for northern New Zealand and Papua New Guinea. Also, if you want to consider the West Pacific part of India, then we're going India down into Sumatra, south of the 4.6 here. 3 small silent zones in a huge area. It's good news that the whole other portion of the West Pacific is moved. So movement up in Japan is good because it's relieving pressure. We have to watch out for new deep earthquakes, but the areas that are silent right now that you see on the map are the spots where the next movement will occur, and it'll be based upon the movement nearby. So, 5s to the north, Kuril Island. Why? Well, we have 5s to the south, and we have 4s and 3s clustering out around western Alaska, meaning the silent zone in between should release. This should all happen in the next day. By tomorrow, I should be reporting to you that the earthquakes have struck at Kuril Islands, going into Alaska, that the silent zone off the west coast was hit, and that South America, we've seen a new earthquake develop all the way down here at the South Sandwich Islands, because all this is going to press down the coast. No doubt about that. Over in Europe, where do we watch? Let's get into Europe really quick. All right, and we'll turn this down for the last 50 earthquakes. Just like all the other places on the planet, the silent zones are the spots where we watch for new movement. Well, this takes us back into central Italy. In between where CERN and the 2.7 in France, we have CERN to the south in Switzerland, and then we have our spot that already got hit multiple times with at least 10 different 2.0 earthquakes across North Italy. Then going down south, we go to Rome, possibly near Rome, east of Rome, southeast of Rome, near that volcano that's coming to back to life after 10,000 years of silence. So, central Italy, and you need to watch for the combined total of what you see to the south and to the north. So, to the north, it's just 1 2.7. To the south, it's a boatload of 3s and 1 4, meaning we should see a 4 or near 4 strike in central Italy in the next day to 2 days at the most. That'll just complete all the 4s all the way over anyway, so I don't think anybody should be shocked by that when you already see all the 4s coming over from Asia, going across the Mideast, and the 4s are marked by the larger circles. Okay, the next stop along the way is just due west of the spot being struck in Turkey, right near the Greece border. Ultimately, it'll all head back out to the mid-Atlantic and cause a series of new earthquakes along the North Mid-Atlantic as Europe presses out to the Mid-Atlantic from the east to west, and as United States presses to the Mid-Atlantic from west to east, sandwiching the Mid-Atlantic, causing earthquakes to develop all the way up the ridge towards Iceland. I've heard there's renewed talk of Hekla again erupting. Well, I mean, is it anybody shocked with all the 5s that just struck up and down the Mid-Atlantic ridge to the north? Just take a look at it. Let's end the video here. It's been, 34-minute long update already. We'll end it here by showing you the rare earthquake striking up the Mid-Atlantic, going up to the North Pole at the Gackel Ridge. Mount Dutch supervolcano at the north tip of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is a discovery I made. 68 miles long, almost 40 miles wide, supervolcano at the North Pole. Beyond the North Pole, actually. This is just south of the North Pole. But it's at the north tip of the North Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and the split goes all the way down past Svalbard, where the 4.7 is, that's island chain there, and then we go south to Iceland. And Iceland, right along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, cuts right through Iceland, and that's where most of the volcanoes are in Iceland. So to see swarms to the south creeping up the Mid-Atlantic and down the Mid-Atlantic, people in Iceland, look where you are. You're right in between the two spots that moved. You got a bunch of movement to your east and a bunch of movement to your west over in the United States. Letting you know you're primed, you're ready, it may go. But the professionals are talking about that, not me. And they're not talking about the pressure transfer. They're just saying Iceland's getting ready to erupt at Hekla. Hasn't erupted in the last, 10 years or some, short amount of time it hasn't erupted. But All right, so that's all she wrote. Hope you guys enjoyed the update. I'll be chiming back in from time to time throughout the night in case you guys are going to be around. I don't know how many people are here in chat right now. Let's take a quick look and see. Looks like about 400 people are in chat right now. If you live on the West Coast, like I said, you have warning time ahead of when earthquakes strike. So these 3 striking up and down the coast are letting us know there's a 5 coming off the coast. And it's going to strike the silent zone, no doubt about it. So that's all, like I keep saying that. You know what? You ever get stuck saying things that you just can't help not say? Little sayings and little stupid things you pick up from something? Lately for me, it's been that's all she wrote. I don't know why. I guess I heard it on TV or maybe I got programmed somehow. So we'll try to stop saying that in the live stream. But guys, I just want to say much love. I won't stop saying that. Much love to everybody in chat for being here. Please get the word out on earthquake preparedness. Just tell people there's a guy on YouTube who is forecasting earthquakes. And you saw it happen tonight live on the stream. As I was talking, 5.3 struck South Chile. We warned last night 24 hours ago. And it struck literally at the 24-hour mark. If you were to go back and watch my video from last night, it was about 17 minutes into my 7 to 17 minutes into my update. I was down there in Chile showing that spot, telling everybody, watch out here for a larger shallow earthquake. There you go. Now a huge swarm is breaking out there. So, all right. Yeah. Oh, one other thing. Down below the video, there's, of course, the share buttons. If you could you share me? Could you share me, man? Please. All right, share me to your friends, family, loved ones, coworkers, anybody that you think cares about earthquakes, and let them know that we try to warn people ahead of time of where to watch. But next to the share button, you guys got to check it out now because we are over 400,000 views on this live stream in the last month and a half. 400,000, and that's a count as of 2 days ago. So we have reached beyond my expectations on who I'd reach. I never thought that people would really use this the way they're using it.